Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a time in history when the world witnesses a shift so powerful, so unstoppable, that no empire, no superpower, no nation can ignore it. That moment is here. That moment is now. And that moment is called the rise of India. India's rise shifts global power in a way the world has not seen for generations, and that is why it carries such a weight of significance. For decades, the global balance was tilted towards the West. Economies, militaries, alliances, and narratives were structured around their dominance. They wrote the rules, and others were expected to follow them. But in 2025, the script is being rewritten. India is no longer content with being on the sidelines of global decisions. It has stepped into the arena with strength, confidence, and ambition, and this shift is not a ripple. It is a tidal wave that is altering the entire global landscape. When a nation of over 1.4 billion people begins to leverage its full potential, the effects are too powerful to be ignored. For years, the West looked at India as a developing nation, full of potential but always a step behind. They underestimated its resilience, overlooked its ability to transform, and failed to see the silent storm building inside its borders. But today, India's economy is growing faster than nearly any other major nation. It has become a magnet for investment, a hub for technology, and a leader in innovation. From digital infrastructure to artificial intelligence, from green energy to manufacturing, India is not just catching up, it is setting new standards. When a nation that was once seen as dependent becomes self-reliant and influential, it does more than just rise. It forces others to rethink their position. This is what truly shifts global power. When one nation refuses to play the old game and instead creates its own rules. India is no longer asking for a seat at the table, it is building a new table, one where it leads alongside others who share its vision. The West fears this, not because India is a threat in the traditional sense, but because India disrupts their monopoly. For years, they dictated who advanced and who stayed behind. Now India is advancing on its own terms, and that terrifies those who have grown used to control. Look at the evidence around us. India's space program has captured the imagination of the world, landing missions on the moon and reaching Mars at a fraction of the cost of the so-called advanced nations. Its technological sector has produced some of the brightest minds, powering global companies, startups, and industries that shape the digital age. Its military is modernizing rapidly, its diplomacy is becoming a voice for the voiceless, and its culture is influencing hearts and minds across the globe. This rise is not accidental, it is intentional. It comes from decades of resilience, planning, and a refusal to be confined by the shadows of the past. The shift in global power is not just about economics or military strength, it is about perception. Once upon a time, India was portrayed as dependent, struggling, and in need of guidance. Today, it is portrayed as a partner, a leader, and a power in its own right. That change in perception is perhaps the most dangerous thing for those who once held all the power. Because perception creates influence, and influence shapes alliances. Nations once tied solely to Western powers are now turning their eyes to India as an alternative, as a balance, as a leader who understands their struggles. This shift in alliances is what shakes the foundations of the West's dominance more than anything else. And make no mistake, this rise did not come without struggle. India's history is one of being underestimated, of being subjected to control, of being told what it could and could not achieve. But those very struggles forged the resilience we see today. A nation that has endured centuries of adversity does not rise weak, it rises unbreakable. That spirit, that determination, that refusal to bend, that is what makes India's rise so different. It is not temporary, it is not fragile, it is not dependent on others. It is rooted in a foundation of resilience that cannot be shaken easily. When the world sees this, when the West realizes this, they know that their old order is slipping away. They know that no matter how much influence they once had, the balance is shifting towards a multipolar world where India stands as one of the giants. They know that every step India takes forward is a step away from the days when they could dictate global affairs without challenge. They know that the rise of India signals the end of a world where power was concentrated in only a few hands. This is why India's rise is not just important, it is historic. It is the kind of shift that will be studied by generations to come, a shift where the underestimated became the unstoppable, where the overlooked became the leader, and where the silenced became the voice that could not be ignored. It terrifies some, inspires others, but one thing is certain: it cannot be stopped. And when power shifts like this, the entire world must adapt, because a new era has begun. The West fears competition because for centuries they were accustomed to a world where their dominance went unchallenged. They controlled trade, dictated policies, set the standards for technology, finance, and global influence. They held the monopoly of not just power but also the narrative of who could rise and who must remain dependent. But India's transformation has broken that pattern, and it has introduced a form of competition they cannot easily contain. The fear does not come from hostility. It comes from the reality that India is proving itself as an equal, and in many ways, as a leader in fields the West thought were theirs to command. When a nation that was once overlooked begins to rise with unstoppable momentum, the balance of certainty that kept others comfortable begins to collapse, and that collapse creates fear. India's competition is unlike others because it is not rooted in imitation. It is rooted in innovation, adaptation, and resilience. For decades, India absorbed knowledge, built systems, and studied the world order carefully. Now it has learned to create its own systems, develop its own technologies, and chart its own course. From space exploration to digital governance, from pharmaceuticals to artificial intelligence, India has shown that it can achieve excellence not by copying others, but by designing its own path. This is why the West looks at India and feels a growing unease, because this is not a nation playing catch-up anymore. This is a nation running its own race and running it fast. The fear grows deeper because India's rise is not isolated. It brings with it the possibility of shifting alliances, of inspiring other nations to step outside the old structures of control. Smaller countries that once leaned heavily on Western powers now see in India a partner who understands their struggles, who represents the possibility of independence, who shows that it is possible to rise without bowing to pressure. The West fears this ripple effect, because when one nation shows that the old order can be challenged, others begin to follow. That is how monopolies crumble, not by sudden collapse, but by steady erosion. India is the erosion of the unquestioned dominance of the West. This competition also terrifies the West because it reveals their vulnerabilities. They once believed that technological leadership was their eternal right. Yet India's achievements in space, science, and digital systems have proven otherwise. They once believed economic dominance would remain theirs unthreatened, yet India's rapid growth and its ability to withstand global crises show that the center of gravity is shifting. They once believed their military and diplomatic influence could dictate terms, yet India has shown the courage to stand firm, to act in its own interest, and to refuse pressure. Each time India stands tall, it is a reminder that the West's control is slipping, and that reminder is what creates fear. But this fear is not just about losing power, it is about losing comfort. The West has been comfortable in a predictable world, where the rest of the globe played roles designed for them. But India is rewriting the script. It refuses to stay confined to someone else's expectations. It refuses to be boxed in as merely a supporting player. Instead, it has taken the stage as a central figure, confident and unafraid. That confidence itself is intimidating. When a nation that was once underestimated begins to believe in itself fully, there is nothing more dangerous to those who relied on its weakness. India's competition is not the kind that can be ignored, because it is not built on aggression, but on progress. Progress cannot be sanctioned, it cannot be stopped by threats, it cannot be erased by propaganda. It is visible, undeniable, and unstoppable. The West sees this progress and understands that for every year India advances, their monopoly shrinks. For every achievement India celebrates, their uncontested authority fades. For every alliance India strengthens, the world shifts further away from dependence on them. That is the essence of the fear. They are watching the clock run out on their era of unquestioned supremacy. The people of India represent a force greater than numbers. It is not just the population size that terrifies, but the collective energy of ambition, innovation, and determination. A billion dreams moving in one direction, a billion voices demanding recognition, a billion minds striving for progress. This is not a force that can be contained. The West sees this collective power and knows it cannot be subdued by pressure or intimidation. They fear what happens when that power reaches its full expression, when every industry, every market, every field feels the impact of India's rise. The truth is simple. Competition exposes weakness. It forces those at the top to prove they still deserve to be there. India has become that competitor, one that cannot be brushed aside, one that cannot be ignored, one that cannot be controlled. That is why the West fears India's rise, because for the first time in a long time they are not looking down at the world. They are looking across, at a nation standing shoulder to shoulder with them, refusing to back down, refusing to be silent, refusing to be anything less than what it was destined to be. India's rise is more than a story of nations and politics. It is a mirror held up to every individual. For years, India was underestimated, overlooked, and told that it could not stand equal to the powers that ruled the world. It was seen as a follower, a nation that had potential but would never break free from the shadows cast over it. But in 2025, the story is different. India stands tall, no longer bowing to pressure, no longer waiting for validation, no longer apologizing for its ambition. This transformation is not only about global power, it is about the human spirit. It teaches that every individual, no matter how underestimated, no matter how overlooked, has the power to rise when they stop accepting the roles others have assigned to them. Think about the years India spent under doubt, where others dictated its path, where its growth was questioned, where its strength was ignored. That is the story of countless people in their own lives. How many times have you been told you are not good enough? How many times have you been made to believe that your dreams are too big, that your goals are out of reach, that your destiny is already decided for you? India's story says otherwise. It proves that no matter how long you have been underestimated, no matter how often you have been pushed aside, you can rise. And when you rise, you terrify those who once doubted you, because they realize that your power was always there, waiting to be unleashed. India's resilience is a reflection of what happens when you refuse to be broken by struggle. For decades, challenges came from every direction: economic setbacks, political pressure, foreign interference, and internal trials. Yet each setback became fuel. Each obstacle became a lesson. Each challenge became a stepping stone. That is how individuals must face life. Every hardship, every rejection, every failure is not the end of your story. It is the sharpening of your spirit. It is the preparation for the day you rise so high that no one can ignore you anymore. The West fears India's rise because it is no longer the silent nation they once looked past. In the same way, your doubters will fear your rise when you stop living in silence. When you stop allowing others to write your story, when you stop asking for permission to succeed, when you stand with unshakable confidence, you change the balance of power in your own life. Suddenly, those who once looked down on you are forced to look across at you. Suddenly, those who once dismissed you are forced to respect you. Suddenly, the game changes because you refuse to play by their rules anymore. India shows that greatness is not granted, it is earned. It is built brick by brick, day by day, through sacrifice, through struggle, through relentless effort. And this is the same for every individual. You cannot wait for the world to hand you respect. You cannot wait for others to validate your dreams. You must work, you must fight, you must rise on your own terms. And when you do, respect will come, success will come, influence will come, not because you begged for it, but because you created it. What terrifies those in power is not just India's achievements, it is India's belief. Belief is the most dangerous weapon in the world because once you believe, no obstacle can stop you. Once you believe, no rejection can silence you. Once you believe, no enemy can defeat you. India's belief in itself has shaken the balance of global power, and your belief in yourself can shake the balance of your life. You do not need the approval of the world to rise. You do not need perfect conditions. You do not need to wait for the right time. The moment you decide to rise, the moment you decide to believe, is the moment everything begins to change. India's story reminds every person that fear is temporary, but power is permanent. Those who doubted India now fear its strength. Those who dismissed India now watch in silence as it takes center stage. The same will happen in your life. The same people who laughed at your dreams will one day be silenced by your success. The same voices that told you it was impossible will one day whisper your name with respect. That is what rising does. It transforms doubt into silence and silence into recognition. This is why India's rise is more than politics, more than economics, more than global strategy. It is a story of human will. It is proof that no matter how underestimated you are, no matter how long you have been held back, you can rise. And when you rise, you are not just lifting yourself, you are changing the world around you. India's rise is a nation story, but it is also your story, my story, the story of every person who refuses to stay small. It is the reminder that the only limits that exist are the ones you accept. And when you stop accepting them, the world will have no choice but to recognize your strength. Strength inspires and terrifies at the same time, because true strength changes the balance of everything around it. When India rises with confidence, self-reliance, and vision, it does more than showcase progress. It sends a message to the world that weakness is no longer an option. Those who once dominated now see themselves being challenged, and that challenge shakes them to their core. Strength does not need to shout. It does not need to beg. It does not need to seek approval. Strength simply stands tall, unshaken, and undeniable, and in its presence, the weak are forced to confront their own fragility. That is why strength is both feared and respected. It exposes truth. For centuries, the West was comfortable with the illusion that their power was untouchable. They held the upper hand in technology, in economics, in global influence. But when India began to rise, that illusion started to crack. Here was a nation they underestimated, showing strength they did not anticipate, displaying resilience they thought had long been broken, and building a future that could no longer be ignored. This kind of strength terrifies those who relied on your silence, because it means their grip on you is gone forever. In the same way, in life, when you discover your own strength, those who once doubted you begin to fear you, because they realize you no longer need them. Strength is inspiring because it gives hope to those who struggle. When people see India rise from decades of being overlooked into a place of leadership, they see possibility for themselves. They see proof that being underestimated is not the end of the story. They see that a journey of hardship can still lead to greatness. Inspiration is born when strength is visible, when courage is lived out, when power is displayed not through arrogance, but through resilience and discipline. India's rise inspires the world because it shows that no matter how long you have been pushed down, you can stand back up taller than ever. But strength also terrifies because it shifts the balance of control. Those who once dictated terms now realize they cannot control the outcome. Those who once gave orders now face resistance. Those who once stood unchallenged now see competition standing right beside them. This is the essence of fear, not that strength destroys them, but that strength removes their dominance. That is why the West looks at India with unease. It is not that India threatens them directly, but that India's very presence changes the way the game is played. Strength creates equality, and equality terrifies those who lived off imbalance. In life, the same principle applies. When you rise with your strength, you inspire those who need hope and terrify those who built their confidence on your weakness. Your strength becomes a mirror, forcing others to see their own limits. And some people cannot handle that reflection. They fear you not because you attack them, but because your very existence as someone strong shows them they are no longer in control. That is why strength is powerful. It does not need to destroy to dominate. It dominates simply by being undeniable. India's strength today is not only in its economy or its military, it is in its belief. Belief is the deepest kind of strength because it cannot be taken away by external force. The West can compete with India's industries, but they cannot compete with its conviction. They can challenge its policies, but they cannot weaken its spirit. Belief is what makes strength permanent. That is why belief in yourself terrifies doubters, because once you decide to rise, nothing they do can stop you. Your strength becomes untouchable because it comes from within, not from external validation. Strength is also feared because it rewrites destiny. When India moves forward with boldness, it rewrites centuries of history where it was kept in the background. It tells the world, we will no longer be defined by what was done to us, we will be defined by what we choose to become. That declaration itself is terrifying to those who profited from the past order. They realize that the story has changed, and once a story changes, it cannot go back. In your life, when you decide to change the narrative, when you rise above the definitions others placed on you, your story terrifies those who thought they had written your ending. The power of strength lies in its ability to transform both perception and reality. The West perceives India differently now, not as a follower, but as a leader. The world perceives possibility differently, not as something limited to one region, but as something that can emerge from anywhere. And individuals perceive themselves differently, not as powerless, but as capable of shaping their future. Reality shifts because strength redefines what is possible. Strength always carries two reactions, inspiration and fear. It is impossible to have one without the other. Those who are ready to grow will be inspired by your rise. Those who built comfort on your weakness will be terrified by it. And that is why strength is the greatest force you can develop, whether as a nation or as an individual. It cannot be denied, it cannot be ignored, and once it is displayed, it forever changes the way the world around you functions. So ladies and gentlemen, ask yourself this: what's stopping you from rising the way India has? What's holding you back from standing tall, from breaking free of limitations, from building a future where no one can control your destiny? The truth is simple. The world fears the strong, but it bows to the unstoppable. And if a nation of 1.4 billion can rise against centuries of control, then you, yes, you, can rise against the struggles of your life. Be the one who terrifies doubt. Be the one who terrifies failure. Be the one who terrifies every limit that ever stood in your way. Because just like India, your rise will terrify those who once underestimated you, and your success will inspire those who thought it was impossible. The future belongs to the bold. The future belongs to the fearless. The future belongs to those who rise,